turbo engine running. Absolute genius.
Get this.
Welcome.
This is the show where we bring you
Science.
What that essentially means is
discoveries,
Advances.
questions,
Research.
technology.
Unbelievable.
Without further ado,
This is The Naked Scientists. Hello, welcome to this week's Naked Scientists podcast, the programme that brings you the biggest breakthroughs and talks to the major movers and shakers in the worlds of science, technology and medicine. I'm Chris Smith. This week, counting the calories. The UK government wants shops to help us put 100 fewer calories in our baskets to beat obesity. Now that's food for thought. Also, archaeologists uncover the world's oldest fat factory. It turns out that Neanderthals were processing bones for their grease 125,000 years ago. And on Mars, the Curiosity rover captures close-up images of spiderweb-like patterns on the planet's surface. So what made them?
From Cambridge University's Institute of Continuing Education, this is The Naked Scientists.
Up first this week, the UK government has unveiled plans to tackle obesity by forcing supermarkets to cut calories from our shopping baskets or face fines. But some industry leaders have slammed the move as nanny statism and overreach, warning that it could hike prices and it won't solve the crisis it set out to. We asked Cambridge University's Giles Yeo, who's author of Why Calories Don't Count, to take a look at the proposals for us.
So the plan is, in effect, to try and make healthy food the easier choice. Okay, so, for supermarkets and food purveyors and things like that. So they have put out this policy guidance, and this is, I think, part of the problem, is just a guidance for supermarkets, to sort of reduce portion size, move the foods around the aisles for a bit. I'm not entirely certain because it wasn't actually told of the food companies what they had to do.
The message that's being put out there is if we can remove 100 calories from the average shopping trolley, then we will dramatically cut obesity. Another statistic on the government webpage is something like 50 calories less a day means 304,000 kids won't become obese or something like that. Is that actually realistic to make those sorts of claims?
From a physics perspective, the numbers probably do add up. When I teach the medical students, I always use this number that when we age from 20 to 50, roughly, we gain about, on average, 15 kilos of weight. And, each kilo of a human being is probably 5,000 calories. So if you actually do the maths, over 30 years, that's 7 calories a day, every day for 30 years, and you suddenly gain 15 kilos. So the moment you're dealing with the 50, 100 calorie mark, actually, the numbers do add up. The problem is, what kind of calories are we talking about? Because calories only give you one piece of information. They just tell you how much food there is. It doesn't give you any nutritional density. Is there salt, sugar, fat, fiber, protein? Nothing. So I think, yes, portion sizes are one problem. The bigger problem is the food quality that we're actually having in our diet at the moment.
The problem I have with it is that I think that kind of messaging is also misleading or hard for people to grasp. Because if, for instance, I was eating the number of calories that would sustain an African elephant in the day, that's about, say, 20,000, and I reduced the number of calories by 100, I'm still going to be morbidly obese, aren't I? So
Yes.
It doesn't really help. So is that part of the problem? We need to be clearer with the messaging for people.
We need to be clearer with the messaging, but I think the calories is unhelpful because the supermarkets will say, well, if we reduce 50 calories, but we'll do it from this versus that. What is the easiest thing to remove calories from? Rather than saying, well, look, why don't we think about how we can make this ready meal, this frozen pizza, how can we make it more healthy? How can we make this chocolate bar more healthy? That's what I want them to think about, rather than just simply the calories, which is just one-dimensional.
So you're advocating for saying, well, if people go into the shop and at the moment say they've got a couple of quid in their pocket and they've got to feed their family and they're going to reach for something that fits their budget, what they're reaching for at the moment is not the healthy option. You're saying we've got to flip that round. So what they do reach for, the affordable option, is the healthy option.
That has to be the case. Otherwise, how are we going to fix obesity equitably, right? Because at the moment, if you're in the bottom 20% socioeconomically in this country, you are more than twice as likely to end up with obesity as you or I, right? The people in the top 20%. And there's no genetic difference between rich or poor. It's an accident of birth. It's access to healthy food. And at the moment, as you say, if you've got a couple of quid, you can get a lot of chips, right? But how much healthy food can you buy? We need to reassess our priorities about where we put subsidies, about whether or not you get buy one, get one free. Where's the buy one, get one free for meat or buy one, get one free for broccoli? It's always buy one, get one free for the unhealthy foods. So we just need to reprioritize what we subsidize, shall we say.
The trouble is that the bad for you stuff tastes good.
Look, absolutely. This is part of the problem, but it is not beyond the wit of man. I think what is lacking here is the right motivation to reformulate the food so that we get certainly healthier food that is just as tasty. It just requires the right motivation. So my biggest issue with this government policy thing is that it is voluntary, that there are no guidelines. What they've said is, well, it's up to the food purveyors, the supermarkets to do what they think is right. I think that's very naive. Most of the food manufacturers, what they want to do is a fixed set of rules that are the same for everybody. And yes, they'll probably take it right to the edge of those rules, but that's fine. But at least then they'll play within the pitch and they can compete with each other. And that's the motivation they need. They need to know that if I sell this and at this price for this health point, that supermarket B is going to try and beat me. And that is the only way we're going to make it more healthy, if we make it marketable to be healthy.
So if you were appointed the government czar to sort this out, what would your recipe be? What would you say, my policy, this is how I'm going to tackle this. This is the strategy. What would the Giles Yeo solution be?
Day one, if I were PM, I would make healthy food the default choice, not the easier choice, because that means that some people can still choose to not have it if they, don't have the resources. If Mrs. Smith walking in with a couple of quid needing to feed her kids, the default has to be healthier. Then we can add all the other frippery on top, right? All this and that and labeling and what have you for the people like us who don't have the key obesity problems to begin with. So I would start equitably by making healthy food the cheapest, tastiest, and default choice.
So who picks up the tab then? Because at the moment, the supermarkets are selling the premium product at a premium price, not just to hit their bottom line, because it costs more. So if you're going to force the price point down on the really fancy stuff so people will be able to afford it, and let's assume they want to buy it, who's going to pay for it?
Well, someone has to pay for it. You're absolutely right. I just think we need to reprioritize. At the moment, there's certain subsidies in some foods here or there. I think if we prioritize the health of our children, and I'm not saying this is easy because a lot of these choices are politically inexpedient, but public health is an interesting thing, right? How much personal liberties are you willing to give up for the health of the greater good? This is what public health is. And so I think we just need to move resources around in order to prioritize healthy default food. If you do that, the amount of money you will save just in broader society will be staggering.
That's a very interesting perspective. So you're saying that the government, the taxpayer, sends a cheque to Tesco so they can sell you food that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford at a cheaper price. It's like paying farmers to grow food that it wouldn't be affordable for them to grow normally. It's a subsidy to encourage people to consume the right sort of food compared to the wrong sort of food that would otherwise end up being the cheaper option.
I think so. And people say, doesn't that sound nanny-statey? You sound like a communist. No. Obesity is a public health problem. If we believe that it's costing our NHS, the workforce, the economy, a great deal of money to try and help people with obesity and all the related diseases, we got to put our money where our mouth is and try and sort the problem out. So yes, I do think that is certainly one of the solutions to consider.
So less a case of nanny state and more a case of nanny plate, perhaps. Giles Yeo there at the University of Cambridge. A growing industry of unproven and often dangerous cancer cures is thriving online, promoted through slick social media campaigns and disinformation. A recent BBC investigation exposed some of the figures profiting from this trade, targeting vulnerable patients and giving them false hope. The surgeon Liz O'Riordan has just written a newspaper article on the topic, drawing on her perspectives both as a breast cancer doctor and a cancer survivor. I've been speaking to her.
I had no idea how much cancer misinformation was online until I became a cancer patient myself. And I was exposed to the world of alternative medicine and people representing themselves as cancer coaches You pay to see them. They help you navigate what treatments you should have, what clinics you should see. And I know it's fraudulent. And then people contacted me, giving me stories of men and women who had used these coaches and who died because they weren't getting normal treatment. And the scale of this is huge. It's like a pandemic.
The people who are cancer coaches, what are their clinical, or in other words, medical qualifications?
So most of them don't have any. Whilst there are reputable cancer coaches who help people navigate treatment, you can often get them in NHS cancer centres. These are often people with no medical experience. Often they've been patients themselves, and this is how they are making money. One's a retired biochemist, one's a woman who's a chiropodist, but they have become self-called experts. They know how to cherry pick data to persuade patients. They charge an awful lot of money, and I just think it is awful taking these vulnerable cancer patients to a place of false hope.
And how do they track down their victims? Do they come and find people, or do they just market their wares and people come and find them?
It's very clever marketing on Facebook groups, on Instagram, on TikTok. Once you start searching for cancer natural therapies, they come up, and they've got glowing testimonials on the websites proving that they can cure you. And a testimonial is now more seductive than a randomized controlled trial. And when you've got cancer, you're vulnerable. You want someone who can cure you. And these people are offering that.
What sorts of things are they telling people to do?
Well, you've got the standard diets, the juicing, the detox, the coffee enemas, buy electric home resonance machines, do parasite cleanses, multiple intravenous infusions and supplements, go to Mexico for treatments that you won't get in the UK, up to 20 or 30 treatments at one time. There's no evidence to show they work, but they make you believe. And when the cancer comes back, they tell you it's because you didn't try hard enough. Let me get another treatment for you. Again, they're kind of doing the shopping like a bespoke shopper to tell you what to choose. And you put your faith in them and people are dying.
The case of Steve Jobs seeking out alternative remedies for what killed him eventually, that was pancreatic cancer. That isn't then just a cause célèbre, that isn't just a one-off. You're saying this is pretty common, that people are being seduced by alternative treatments, when we know there are certain cancers that would definitely respond better to proper medical intervention.
It's the tip of the iceberg. I've had 20 or 30 people reach out and tell me about people who've died through either using cancer coaches or going directly for alternative treatments. There's evidence to show that if you only have alternative therapy, you are twice as likely to die. And that number is 5 or 6 times more likely if you have breast, bowel or lung cancer. And take the case of Paloma Shemirani in the recent Panorama article. She had an 80% chance of a cure with a lymphoma, but she died because she was persuaded to choose a juicing diet instead.
How on earth is this ethical?
It's not. It's not ethical at all. It's illegal to advertise cancer treatments online. I don't know how these people live with themselves, but they lull you into a sense of security. They offer control, they offer hope, and it breaks my heart.
Where do you think we should start trying to deal with this then?
I honestly don't know. I think social media companies have to take some response to this. It's doing harm. I think for the cancer coaches, they're not offering medical treatment, they are helping you choose it, and they often have disclaimers, check with your oncologist, I'm not a doctor, if it doesn't go right, sue me. I think it's raising awareness, but also letting doctors know, because I had no idea this was going on until I became a patient myself. And also when they're putting ads online, Meta and TikTok are getting shares of those ads.
So did they come after you? Because you had breast cancer. As a breast surgeon, you knew all about it, but did they come after you?
They didn't come after me. I don't think they target individuals, but I've seen the adverts and I've started researching this for my book. And suddenly the more you look at parasite cleansers, the more you see those, they come up on your feed. And when you see so many of them, you start to think, is there any truth in this? I know there's not, but most people don't have the knowledge that I do, and you can get succumbed. And we need to find some way to stop this and to educate the public so they know to look out for the red flags of people promising they can cure you. Doctors aren't online telling you that chemo isn't a great drug to have, but it does save lives, and radiotherapy isn't great, but it does save lives. We're not doing that. These alternative providers are.
One wonders whether when people are having those clinic appointments, when you get the diagnosis and you are extremely vulnerable, if people need to have some help at that point to warn them, watch out, there are some sharks in these waters.
I used to say, don't Google. And it's the first thing I did when I was diagnosed. I did it when my mum was diagnosed. I think we need to say, these are safe websites to go to. Let us digitally signpost you. And if you see anything online that you're even remotely thinking about, double check it with 2 or 3 reputable sources so you can tell whether it's actually true or whether it's nonsense.
It really is amazing how low some people will go, isn't it? Some sage advice there from Liz O'Riordan, surgeon, cancer survivor, and author of The Cancer Roadmap. She has got actually a very compelling story of her own to tell. Do look up Liz online if you get a moment.
The Naked Scientists podcast is produced in association with Spitfire, cost-effective voice, internet and IP engineering services for UK businesses. Find out how Spitfire can empower your company at spitfire.co.uk.
Music in the programme is sponsored by Epidemic Sound, perfect music for audio and video productions.
This is the Naked Scientist podcast with me, Chris Smith. Still to come, the spiders from Mars. What is behind the red planet's web-like patterns? But first, a remarkable archaeological discovery at the lake landscape of Neumarkt Nord near Leipzig in Germany has revealed that our Neanderthal cousins were rendering animal bones for grease there as far back as 125,000 years ago, at what can best be described as a fat factory. This is the earliest example of such a practice found yet. Fat mattered to these ancestors because it was a long-term way to store an energy-dense foodstuff. The Neanderthals thrived for hundreds of thousands of years in some very harsh conditions, so harnessing this nutritional know-how could well have been a key ingredient in their success. The discovery, which has been published in Science Advances, dramatically reshapes our understanding of early human ingenuity and survival. Here's Lutz Kindler from the Monrepos Archaeological Research Centre and Museum for Human Behavioural Evolution.
The sites are lake basins that developed during this last interglacial, how we call it, this warm phase. And these were uncovered by lignite mining. The people were exploiting brown coal there. Usually we have only small keyholes when we look into Neanderthal pasts. But there, because this is the last opening of the landscape, we have a whole panorama, what happened 125,000 years ago in the landscape. And this makes Neumarkt Nord so fantastic and exceptional.
So when they were bringing bones to this site, what were they doing with them and why were they doing that?
We found 120,000 bones along the margin of a former lake, together with 16,000 stone artifacts and hammerstones, anvils, and so on, into a very small area, about 50 square meters. It's a 6-yard box of a football field in England, this small area. 120,000 bones. They're coming from 172 different animals. For example, owl, ox, horses, or red deer. And these bones were smashed into tiny, tiny pieces. And these fragments were used to extract bone grease by boiling them in hot water. And the reason for this is to get the fat out of the bones, because this is a very essential macronutrient that humans need, and Neanderthals too.
Does the bone grease rendering process leave some particular footprint or fingerprint on the bone that tells you that's what they had done to it? So you know that is what the purpose was of bringing the bones there to do that to them?
So this heavy fragmentation of bones from Neanderthal sites is not so unusual, but usually we can't tell if it's done by Neanderthals or by some other kind of actions. But here in Neumarkt Nord, we are very sure that it is Neanderthals who did this. For example, we know that certain types of damages on very small fragmented bones are produced during bone grease rendering fragmentation. This we know from experiments. And these same damages we also find on the bones at Neumarkt Nord. On the other hand, unfortunately, it's not possible to find chemical signatures of boiling bones. So if you treat them with low temperature, 80 to 100 degrees, this is not possible because we can't discriminate these signatures from preservation in the soils that can also happen to the same signatures on the timescale of 120,000 years.
And during this process, so what would you do? Put lots of bone fragments in a big pot of water and heat that up so the grease presumably floats to the top. And what does it then condense into a lake of lard that you then scrape up? Is that how they did this?
Exactly. This is how it is described in the ethnohistoric record, which means observations of hunter-gatherers during the last several hundred years. They did it in the same way. And so we imagine that it also happened at Neumarkt Nord.
What's the significance of having found this? What does this tell us about Neanderthal behaviour? And perhaps also the other question, which is, I mean, we learned recently from Andrea Manica when we interviewed him about anatomically modern humans trying and failing many times to leave Africa. Neanderthals had already succeeded. Is it things like this that enabled them to flourish in the environments that they did when they did so early compared to our direct ancestors who were less successful initially?
So Neanderthals lived in Europe for more than 200,000 years. So they could do quite well in these changing landscapes of the Ice Age, in warm phases, cold phases, and so on and so on. So they are really successful humans. What we know from Neanderthals is they hunted a lot. So we know how they acquired foods, but we have no much information about how they prepared food and how they deal with food. And this bone grease rendering site tells us something about storage of food items so that you don't have to live from hand to mouth. This is a typical idea we have about Neanderthals. No, it was different. They know that they need food for winter, that they have to have provisions. And all this comes along now with the evidence for bone grease rendering at the site, because with the fat you can also produce something that is known in North America as pemmican, or in Southern Africa as biltong, that you mix it with meat and then you can store this food item for over a year. And this, of course, has also some social implication, how to organize work, how to divide labor in processing meals and food items, and how to share it with your comrades. So this is a very social thing that we learned from this. And the basic behavior that we see now in Neumarkt Nord of Neanderthals, so how they organize their living, is not so different from what we know from more recent hunter-gatherers. They organize in the same way, maybe with different technology, also maybe with a different social organization. But these similarities, I think, are very, very important, because we are not so unique as modern humans as we always think. We still have to survive another 100,000 years also to reach the 200,000 years timescale for our being on the Earth.
Great story, that, isn't it? Lutz Kindler there. Well, there's something else ancient now, but not on Earth. There are spider webs on Mars, but they're not made by any spiders from Mars that would have made David Bowie famous. These are strange interlocking networks of lines that were first seen from space, and now the Curiosity rover has trundled over to take a closer look and has revealed their true identity. They're heaps of material that were piled up billions of years ago by flowing water and glued together by dissolved minerals, making them tough enough to stand the test of time. But where water once flowed, life might also have lurked, which is why Curiosity is taking a keen interest. Our very own Ziggy Stardust, and that's Richard Hollingham at the Space Boffins, has the story, as well as some other illuminating insights into the funding situation at NASA at the moment.
Curiosity has been investigating these spiders' webs on Mars. There are no spiders on Mars. I'm sad to say. Well, no spiders we yet
Despite
know
what David
about
Bowie
on
said.
Mars.
Now I'm disappointed.
Despite what David Bowie says, there might be. We just haven't found them yet. These were seen first by Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter back in 2006. It's one of these orbiting spacecraft. And Curiosity has essentially gone in to have a closer look. They're not actually called spiders' webs. They're called boxwork formations. I've been reading a little bit about these. They're essentially formed very much like stalactites or stalagmites on Earth, created by water, and that is the key, because that's what Curiosity's been doing. It's been going to interesting places, roving around very slowly and looking at these places where there was once water, because, we now know that Mars was once a wet planet, flowing rivers, lakes, seas. I mean, that's just extraordinary. Now it's just this red, dusty desert. And of course, if water once flowed, that's an ingredient for life. Was there once life? And is there still life on Mars?
That's the reason then that it's homing in on those formations, because they indicate this was once wet, water, essential ingredient for life. Curiosity's part of its mission is to look for molecules linked to life, ergo that's a really good place to go and investigate.
Absolutely. It's also been looking at shores where you see these formations that could only have been carved by water. You know, water once flowed through there. But what's happened since the water's gone from Mars is just been whipped up by this wind over eons, over thousands, millions of years into these much more spider-like formations. But just be able to see that this was formed by water, I think is just extraordinary, because you just got to imagine millions of years back.
The thing that's extraordinary, though, to my mind, isn't so much those formations, it's curiosity itself. I remember 13 years ago, I think we even spoke to you about the whole way that this car-sized rover was coming down on the surface of Mars and it was going to trundle around doing this kind of thing. It is still going. I mean, that is a triumph of engineering if ever I saw one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not small. This is the size of a car, something the size of a Mini, a six-wheeled rover. It's got a nuclear battery on board, which I think is one of the keys really to its longevity. So it's not got solar panels. A lot of the other rovers that have not lasted so long, their solar panels have degraded, they got covered in dust, they've kind of died. Whereas this is just carrying on, trundling along. And there's not just one, there's Curiosity. There's also Perseverance trundling around Mars. These two extraordinary rovers are avatars, if you like, on Mars, giving us these extraordinary images, investigating these areas where there might once have been life, where there was certainly water. Absolutely phenomenal engineering achievement.
What does the future hold for them, though? Because I wanted to ask you this, because obviously you're very in tune with what's happening politically in America, science budgets and so on. What does the future hold? How are they funded? And are they going to carry on for another 12, 15 years?
I have never seen so much concern amongst the scientific community and the space science community, not just in the United States, but across the world. So the White House budget proposes a 25% cut in the NASA budget, which equates to a 50% cut in the NASA science budget. And that would make, an extraordinary difference to not just current missions, but future missions. The sort of cuts you're likely to see is, well, can they afford to keep the teams behind the Curiosity rover and the Perseverance rover? We know if this cut goes through that almost certainly that the next big mission to Mars, the proposed Mars sample return, where we bring back samples from Mars that the Perseverance rover has been collecting, that just won't happen. That will be cancelled. It even puts a question mark over the Rosalind Franklin rover, the European rover, because that has a NASA component to it. It puts a question mark over future telescopes, over future missions to Venus, for example. I mean, it will make a huge dent in not just NASA expertise, but scientific expertise right across the US, and that has ripples around the world because space is such an international endeavour.
The case has always been made, though, that when you spend £1 on space, you get far more than £1 back in terms of the return to the economy and the science and the technology that you inevitably create to solve all the problems to do what you want to do. Donald Trump's a businessman. He must see that that's a good investment.
Yeah, I don't honestly understand the logic behind it. I mean, you can even look at the human space program, of which I do a lot of reporting on, and NASA puts out a report that says you put $1 in, you get $7 out of benefit to the wider economy. So I don't understand the thinking behind this at all, because, surely NASA is one of America's greatest achievements.
Richard Hollingham from the Space Boffins there, revealing more about the spider webs on Mars and the dire financial situation in US science. Well, now it's time for Question of the Week, and James Titko has been pondering this climatic query from our listener Simon.
Is green technology causing climate change? It seems to me that we turned the planet off for 2 years during the pandemic, and rather than problems being better, they've got dramatically worse. Thanks, Simon. It's true that although the COVID crisis did see a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions globally, plunging by 4% in 2020 according to the IMF, since then we've seen them reach levels even higher than before the pandemic, and temperatures continue to rise as well. Green technology is not causing climate change, but the solution to climate change. I've been speaking with Sean Fitzgerald, Director of the Centre for Climate Repair at the University of Cambridge.
Since the emergence from lockdown, we're back on the previous trend. And that trend was already showing signs of increasing emissions year on year. But the pandemic was interesting in that it showed not just what dip could arise as a result of society locking down, but in a way, how small the dip was as a result of such a big lockdown. And therefore, it's not a case of, in terms of the answer being, we've got to shut down the whole of the global society to cure climate change, because it won't actually make that much of a difference. No, the bigger issues are about fundamental infrastructure and the way that we make energy available to society. These are the big issues that we need to grapple with if we're going to make a dent on climate change.
And yet, despite exponential growth in green technologies recently, solar power, electric vehicles, we're still seeing temperatures climb higher and higher, resulting in, for example, the deadly heat waves engulfing much of Western Europe at the moment.
Yes, we are seeing an explosion of solar and wind as part of the energy provision. But at the same time, the world in general is needing more energy because population is increasing a little bit, but also standards of living are going up across the world. And energy is one of those key hallmarks of improved standards of living. We need to work even faster, even harder at getting green technologies being developed, especially the source of energy, to displace and reduce the amount of fossil fuels being burned globally.
Sean Fitzgerald, Director of the Centre for Climate Repair at the University of Cambridge. Thanks to him and to you, Simon, for your question. Next time, we're answering this one from Leonard. I would like to know, please, about Lyme disease. How is it acquired and diagnosed?
And if you think you know the answer, why not log on to the forum and have your say on this and all of our other questions at nakedscientist.com/forum. You can, of course, if you have a question you'd like us to dig into or an answer to supply, get in touch by email. It's chris@thenakedscientist.com. I know many of you are very eager to hear a bit more about the situation which we've had unfolding here. I have no further updates for you yet, but people are working on this and I hope to have some news for you very, very soon. In the meantime, please join me also in saying well done and thank you very much to Mariuszka Subban, who was with us from South Africa. She published the programme on Tuesday that you listened to, all about the science of proteins. We think she's done a brilliant job. Thanks for coming, Mariuszka, and I hope you enjoyed being with us as our Naked Scientist South Africa intern. That's all we've got time for today. Join us on Tuesday when Will Tingle's going to be exploring the genetics of gardening. We'll be hearing from a whole host of contributors at the Cambridge University Botanic Gardens. The Naked Scientist comes to you from the University of Cambridge and it's supported by Rolls-Royce. I'm Chris Smith. Thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.